A district judge in the United States will tomorrow, Monday, rule on an application by Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu to compel Chicago State University from handing over his academic records to his political rival, Atiku Abubakar. Judge Nancy Maldonado of the United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois had last week placed an immediate stay on the release of President Tinubu's university records after he pleaded severe and irreparable consequences to his life. Back home here in Nigeria, some students of the University of Lagos and other universities recently took to the streets to express their dissatisfaction with the decision of their school authorities to raise tuition fees. That action was more or less replicated in many other universities across the country. Some of the students expressed their determination to continue protesting until the school authorities reverted to the previous fees, stating that the fee increase lacked empathy. The students also called on the federal government to allocate the funds from subsidy removal towards education instead of allowing an increase in school fees. In a related development, the federal government has also approved the implementation of a 25% pay rise for lecturers in all federal institutions. The government had earlier objected to the payment of 25% to lecturers in the tertiary institutions when it raised those of professors to 35%. But in a circular dated September 21, 2023, and issued by the Office of the Auditor General of the Federation to polytechnics and colleges of education, the Auditor General said the implementation was approved by the Presidential Committee on Salaries at its 13th meeting. According to the circular, the decision was taken after taking into consideration various stages of collective bargaining. Femi Falana, senior advocate of Nigeria, is a top lawyer and someone who has consistently taken a position on issues bordering on labor and other socioeconomic disputes in Nigeria. He joins me now. Good to see you, Mr. Femi Falana, SCN. Thank you for joining me on this Daylight Sunday Talk Show.
Thank you very much, Ruben.
Okay, first, let's start with the certificate saga and the voyage of discovery that certain parties to the 2023 presidential election have embarked upon in the United States. And you've been quoted as saying, well, in the U.S. jurisdiction, President Tinubu can plead the right to privacy and non-disclosure, but can that, court tomorrow take a decision on the basis of public policy? And if a decision is taken on the basis of public policy or public interest, would that have any relevance in a foreign jurisdiction? Since the discovery that Judge Gilbert was talking about was about discovery for use in a foreign jurisdiction.
Well, my position is that the proceedings in the United States court tomorrow will be centered on the plea by President Tinubu to have his private right protected, as well as the insistence or the plea by Alhaji Atiku Abubakar to have the records disclosed in the public interest. So the judge will have to marry the two and, come out with a decision. If the court holds that the right of President Tinubu should take precedence, I'm sure that will not be the end of the battle. Alhaji Atiku Abubakar is likely to file an appeal, and vice versa. If the court also rules in favor of Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, President Tinubu may also file an appeal. So either way, it's likely to be a long drawn-out battle. But unlike here, where because of congestion of cases, matters of this nature may be subjected to some adjournment in the United States of America, and as you have seen in the case, speedy trial, speedy hearing is encouraged. I mean, the last proceedings were conducted via telephone, you know? So you don't have to assemble all the lawyers and interested parties to come and sit and wait for the judge. You just simply had a telephone conversation and the judge, you know, made his order. So those are lessons for Nigerians, lawyers and judges or the legal profession, and indeed the entire country. Those are lessons to learn from the case. Okay. So that's the way I look at it. And if, of course, at the end of the day, if Alhaji Atiku Abubakar succeeds, again, go on.
No, what I wanted you to also look at is the relevance. Can the discovery for use in a foreign court be relevant in a foreign jurisdiction like Nigeria's? Considering the level that the presidential election case has reached, will it be admissible before the Supreme Court of Nigeria? The Supreme Court not being a court of evidence. So of what purpose would this voyage of discovery
my understanding, be? Now, if Alhaji Atiku Abubakar succeeds in the United States, he will have to register the judgment in Nigeria. And once the judgment is registered, I guess there will be an application to the Supreme Court. And the task before the applicant will be to convince, for his lawyers to convince the Supreme Court, you know, to admit the record, while the respondent's lawyer, that's President Tinubu's lawyer, will also want to convince the court that it's too late in the day to admit the record. So it's going to be an interesting battle, legal battle, as it were. Okay,
but given...
but I cannot, personally, I cannot preempt the court. That would be unprofessional. The Supreme Court, by saying categorically and affirmatively that the document will be admitted or not admitted. No, I cannot say that.
Anyway, but one major issue in this process is Tinubu's counsel pleading severe and irreparable damage. What does that really mean in real terms? You know, just record of academic qualification?
Well, again, as I discharged Charles a few days ago, I think that question ought to be directed to the lawyer and his client. I'm not in a position, because for me, once you're a public figure, the question of privacy simply doesn't arise. In the case of Otto Nwankwo and the state, the Court of Appeal, I think in 1983, made the point that if you're a public officer and you feel too irascible or uncomfortable with public issues, you better cover your 2 eyes, 2 ears with cotton wool, you know, so that you won't be disturbed by what people say around, you know, about you. So I do not understand what the lawyer meant by that statement. Because once the university has confirmed that President Tinubu attended the institution and that he's our graduate, right? I understand that Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, you know, to be saying that, okay, yes, I now want to have the details. All Alhaji Atiku Abubakar is saying is that, yes, since you have confirmed that President Tinubu attended the university, can we have the details? That's all.
Okay, the other subject I wanted to discuss with you is a protest over the hike in students' fees. And we've seen quite a number of university students protesting. Students of the University of Lagos, University of Jos, Femi Awolowo University. And in most of these cases, what you have found is that maybe for the faculties in the humanities, the school fees may have been increased from maybe 28,100 naira to 120,000 naira. And for sciences and medical students and faculty of pharmacy, maybe to about 190,000 naira. And parents and, students are saying, no, this must not be increased because the right to free education is constitutional. Is the right to free education constitutional? Should the federal government of Nigeria bear the burden of the payment of fees for students at the tertiary level?
Well, in the first place, these protests remind me of the Ali Must Go protests of 1978. I was privileged as an undergraduate, my first year in the university, to have taken part in that historic protest. And I think the argument then and now is that the Nigerian state has no right to commercialize education. Education is so basic. And that is why it is enshrined in Section 18 of the Constitution that the Nigerian government will provide free education, affordable education from primary to university level. However, as and when due. But the students are saying, we believe we have enough resources in the country. If the government can prioritize its programs to be able to fund education adequately. Now, you are asking whether the body should be borne by the government. Of course, it is the responsibility of the government to invest in education so that our human resources can be developed. And that is the whole lesson. My own worry now is that whereas our country is training young people, right? They are trooping out of the country after graduation. And the government doesn't seem to be bothered. How can you spend money to train your own citizens only to allow them to serve other countries? If I were in the government, I would have said, okay, the British government, the United States government, Saudi Arabian government, our young people are coming to your country. You are recruiting nurses and teachers, pharmacists and others here. Can we sit down and, so that you can also give back? Because it's very expensive to train a medical doctor in the United Kingdom or in the United States. Now, they have been trained here. Now, how can our country allow them to go out and serve other countries? So, those are the issues the government will have to address. The other point is, in 1992, ASU fought and won a battle to tax all employers of labor. All companies are required to contribute 3% of their profit, by way of education tax. But how many companies are paying the tax? Those are the issues to address. Only an infinitesimal number of companies, pay the tax. So for me, these are the issues. Let us look at, and then for the universities, are there jobs? Are there jobs that can be executed by the respective faculties instead of giving out jobs to contractors? So the government will have to really think outside the box in funding education. But it is the responsibility of the government. And now that the economy is in crisis, how do you expect the children of the poor to access education? How?
Okay, but
I know many people in government, majority of the people in government would not have been able to acquire university education if education had been commercialized during their school days.
But Mr. Falana, isn't it the fact that some of these parents who are complaining about fees hike also send their children abroad to very expensive universities, civil servants, ordinary people, and they are complaining about 120,000 naira, which is not even up to $200. If we may make that comparison.
You see, for for a member of the elite, like your good self, or members of the bourgeoisie, 120,000 naira means little or nothing. It's not even enough to feed the dogs of many of these guys. But for the majority of our people in a country where a government agency, such as the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, has said that 133 million Nigerians are phenomenally poor. And with the recent floating of the naira, removal of subsidy, the number has increased. So we are talking of the parents of those Nigerians who are today not less than 140 million. We're not talking of a few people who can afford to spend 10 million naira or more per annum to educate their children.
Well, another thing I wanted to ask, what do you think is the way forward? Because even the university authorities are saying that they cannot afford to sustain these federal universities at the rate of maybe 10 million, 11 million naira per month, which is the allocation that they get, even at the best of moments.
I have made a point. A lot of the allocation, some part of the allocation goes to the pocket of contractors. I mean, for instance, some of the first generation universities have departments of architecture, building departments, and the rest of them. So why are you not allowing the universities to put up structures in there? I mean, for even not just for themselves, also for other universities, or to the members of the public. I know one. I think it was Tanzania. Under President John Magufuli, that insisted that universities should not go out to hold any seminar, and that government departments should even take advantage of the halls in the universities for seminars so that the universities can raise money. But what is important, as I said, the government has agreed that 3% of the profit of every company should go to funding of education. So we need to look at that. Secondly, under the UBE Act and UBE laws in each of the state, the Compulsory Free Education Act provides that state government will contribute counterpart funding to the money released by the federal government for universal basic education. So every Nigerian child, from primary to junior secondary school, should be educated at the expense of the state. If the law is implemented, we wouldn't have 20 million children roaming the street. So, and that is what I mean. That, okay, what do we do to educate our people? So it's the duty of the government to, and I do hope that when the National Assembly, the House of Reps and the Senate resume any moment from now, there should be a public hearing so that we begin to interrogate, how we can fund university education, how we can fund tertiary education, secondary education, and primary education in our country. And there's money. I think what is lacking is the political will on the part of the government.
Mr. Falana, you say there is money. You say there is money at a time when Nigeria is heavily in debt. Over 87 trillion debt.
I have just said that. Ruben, again, when I talk of the government mastering the political will to raise money, I know what I'm talking about. What is 87 trillion naira? Domestic debt? No. What I am saying, the NEITI, National Extractive, Transparency,
Extractive Industry Transparency
has just come up with a report last week. Yes, NEITI came up with a report last week that the government has a duty to collect $15 billion from NNPC withheld Two, that 200 billion naira was spent on refineries that are comatose in 2021 alone. I also have another report, proceedings of the Senate, where the LNG informed the Senate that in the last 20 years or thereabout, the dividends that have been paid to the Federation account through the NNPC was $18 billion. Feed gas, $15 billion. Tax, $9 billion. Now, what is the problem with collecting this fund? What is the problem? And that is what I mean by asking the government to muster the political will. And I can go on and on. The Supreme Court of Nigeria, in 2018, the Supreme Court of Nigeria found that the federal government has refused to implement the provisions of a law, the Offshore Inland Production Basin Act, for 18 years, and that therefore the federal government should go and cost what the country has lost. The federal government tasked a firm of accountants, please can you find out what we have lost? The figure arrived at was $62 billion. And the government wrote to the oil company, oil majors, the IOCs, can we have this money? A minister of the government at the material time, Mr. Timpere Silva, Minister of State in the Ministry of Petroleum, came out. Ruben, you can Google that no country can collect, this huge sum of money. That it's not possible for the country to be able to collect such huge sum of money. So it is the duty of the government to collect money owed the country so that you can fund education and health and other social services.
Well, Mr. Falana, this same government that we have been blaming just decided to increase the salaries of non-academic staff in tertiary institutions to about 25%, in fact 25.3%, and that of chief lecturers in polytechnics and monotechnics and professors in universities to 35%, backdated to January 2023, which means that this category of federal government workers who had been agitating for salary increase are going to get some substantial, windfall. Although the matter of the 8-month salary that was not paid, well, money is money.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Do you think the government should be commended for this move?
Well, as well as said that the salary increase has not been communicated to its members. But if you look at the increase, the 35% was actually offered by the Buhari administration, was rejected by ASU on the ground that it wasn't enough at all. If you mention a professor on 400,000 naira will now earn 500,000 or 520,000. That's about $500. It's unthinkable to pay a professor $500 in any part of the world today. So, to that extent, the government will have to look at the figures once again and ensure that the salaries that are paid to lecturers, as the ASU will say, their take-home should be able to take them home. If you imagine the salary structure in the country, you definitely cannot clap for the government. If a senator, according to Senator Shehu Sonny, receives about $15 million naira per month, and you are giving 500,000 naira to a professor, there is a problem. So the government, I thought the government was going to have a holistic salary review so that every worker, every professor in the university would then appreciate why they are asked to make sacrifice and collect only $500. Or if it's about having a situation where the chairman of a local government who earn $1 million naira and a professor is giving 520,000 naira per month, there are problems. There are problems. Now, workers are also demanding a minimum wage that is a living minimum wage. So the government will really need to study the economy very well, plug the leakages, muster the political will to recover money, huge sums of money, all the country. And of course, like the students are saying, if in April, what was shared to the three tiers of government was barely 600 billion naira. Now, because of removal of fuel subsidy, it has gone to about 900 billion, 1 trillion naira per month. The challenge before the government is to see what can be done to alleviate the suffering of our people and then pay relevant wages to workers in the country. Now, that's my position.
Well, on that note, Mr. Femi Falana, SAN, I would like to thank you very much for joining me on this Live This Sunday talk show. Thank you very much indeed.